What's up, Network and Chill family? Welcome to another episode of the Network and Chill podcast. Unfortunately, today I'll be doing this one alone, solo, without my bro Red. So you only have Rick today, but we're here for a special episode featuring Chase Oliver, the Libertarian presidential candidate. What's up, Chase?
Nothing much, just enjoying traveling across the country, running for president, and speaking to folks just like yourself. Look forward to having a great conversation and giving your listeners something to check out.
Awesome, man. Well, we're so excited to have you here in Louisville, just to share and come and share your platform with us. So let's jump right in. A lot of people only are familiar with the primary two parties here, the Democrat and the Republican Party. So can you tell us a little bit about the Libertarian Party and your platform?
Yeah, well, first, I don't blame a lot of people for not being familiar with parties outside of the two-party system. It's kind of somewhat rigged that way to kind of make you fall into that default. But the Libertarian Party, we're the third largest political party in the United States. We've been around since 1971. And broadly speaking, we're about maximum freedom for each and every individual. We believe in a guiding principle called the non-aggression principle, which says that if you're not aggressing against someone else's liberty, you should be free to live your life as you see fit. And so my elevator pitch to people is, if you're living your life in peace without force, fraud, coercion, theft, or violence, your life should be your life, your body should be your body, your business should be your business, and your property should be your property. It's not mine, and it's not the government's to have anything to do with. And that leads us to a condition which I think is the best for our country in terms of prosperity and building things, which is we have all kinds of people who live all kinds of different lives with different values, but so long as we can agree not to use the government to push those values on one another, we'll live in pretty good harmony, and we'll see the best of everything come to rise to the top. I think it's the best condition to create the true American dream, the patchwork quilt of diversity that this country's kind of known for.
Oh, man, I love that. I know I often tell people, like, if you can do anything, just don't infringe up on my rights, and I'm not infringing up on yours. I don't care kind of what you do. So I love that. So what life's experiences kind of led you to become a libertarian? I know, for me, I became an independent probably about 10 years or so ago. And, there were some things that made me make that switch. So what led you to the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, so my journey was kind of, it was rooted in activism. So my first real political awakening, I'd always paid attention to politics, been very interested in it. But the first thing that really got me out on the streets was being an anti-war protester. And so I was in high school when 9/11 occurred. Very shortly thereafter, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was very much opposed to us exporting our values using militarism and trying to fight an idea, a war on terror, because a war on ideas are basically endless. And so I kind of joined in that effort, and that led me to become a Democrat for quite a while because George Bush was the Republican president. And as we said at the beginning, not everybody knows about the two-party system, about anything beyond it. And so I thought, hey, if he's a Republican, I guess I'm a Democrat. I was also openly gay, and so I felt like maybe the Democrats were a little bit more respecting of my life choices there as well. But then when Barack Obama got elected, he got elected on a lot of anti-war promises. I fought for him in the primary to beat Hillary Clinton in 2008 because I thought he's the anti-war voice. And then he didn't end any of the wars. And so that kind of made me go, hey, whoa, wait a second here. Maybe this isn't the party for me. Like maybe this was more about being anti-George Bush than really being anti-war. And so that drove me out, made me an independent for a while, and I discovered the Libertarians in 2010 at the Atlanta Gay Pride Festival. Wow. Yeah, they were there doing their thing, and their candidate for governor literally waved me into the tent, and when I told him I was anti-war, he said, welcome home, this is where you need to be. And I think it's where a lot of Americans really, if they look at their belief system of like live and let live, seeing the power of diversity, seeing the power of multiple ways of life kind of bring the best to bear, they would be libertarians themselves. But that's really what got me into it, was being anti-war, thinking the Democrats were, and then when they weren't anti-war enough for me, finding that journey. And luckily, libertarians were at the Pride Festival there in the tent, because it might have taken me a while longer to discover them had they not been.
Oh, that's awesome. So talking about anti-war, how do you feel about the pullout? They say that we pulled out too soon, and that's caused some of the issues that we're currently seeing in the Middle East and whatnot. So being anti-war, how do we, I wouldn't say push our agenda as, democracy, but how do we continue to foster good relations in the Middle East and beyond?
Well, it's important to remember that we're not fully pulled out and disengaged from the Middle East. We still have troops on the ground in active zones in Syria and other areas. It's why we lost some members of the military just last year. We lost 3 in the Syrian and Iraqi areas of the Middle East. And we're still actively engaging in drone bombings and other military actions around the world. But if you're talking about pulling out of Afghanistan, I mean, that was a decade long. I mean, we should have pulled out of Afghanistan in 2003. Like we should never have been there for 20 years. And in fact, if you look what we did, we fought a war to oust the Taliban, spent 20 years trying to build a democracy and build this like shining city on a hill in Afghanistan when maybe the population was not ready for that culturally, economically. There's just not the building blocks there to create a modern democracy there. So we spent 20 years trying to contain everything. And then what did we do? We returned it back to the Taliban, essentially, while also kind of abandoning the government that we had helped foster and create. It was a bungled way to pull out. Certainly, there was a lot of equipment left behind, people left behind, but we should have gotten out of Afghanistan. And as bad as it was, I'm glad we're no longer there. Now, what do we do to spread our influence around the world? Well, don't spread our influence with a bomb, with a bullet, with a drone. You do that with mutual aid, and you do that with a voluntary exchange. You do that with direct diplomacy with our neighbors and treat them on a level playing field. One of the things that Barack Obama promised in 2008 that I really wish he had done was when he said, I'll meet with any world leader without precondition because I think diplomacy is important. If I were elected president, that would be my first foreign policy goal, which is before we even think about war, before we even think about using violence to solve our issues, can we not at least come to the table with these people and have a direct negotiation? I think that would do wonders as opposed to us, exporting our values with violence. I don't think that makes the world love us anymore.
Yeah. Well, let's move into economics then. If we're building relationships with these, countries, and we've seen, Donald Trump and the tariffs that he placed on Chinese goods, for instance, and other countries. How do we do? Is that the right thing to do, or how do we foster and make sure that they're playing fair and that American companies can be just as successful?
Yeah, I see. I can understand the impulse to think that that's a good thing to do, but the truth is that tariffs don't affect China. They affect Americans. We pay the tariff because we're paying it at the point of purchase when we purchase Chinese goods. So it's not like China's paying them. We pay it at the end. But I don't think the best way to engage with China is to create a trade war with them, to engage in these trade war tactics. We should actually encourage more free trade. And China's doing something right now. They're manipulating their currency. They're kind of inflating their market share. But what's going to happen is eventually that bubble bursts. And so the best way we can try to combat that is to regularly keep letting them pump that bubble up. And when that bubble bursts and they fall into recession, hopefully their population calls out for market liberalism and a freer and better world. We can't force that. We can't fight a war for that. But what we can do is continue to be a trading partner that's engaging in good faith. And those who are not engaging in good faith, ultimately their house of cards will fall. And we are the most powerful economic engine in the world. And so if anybody can withstand a little bit of that going on in the meantime, we can. And so we need to be, leading by example, supporting free trade, supporting open and voluntary exchange with one another, because that's the American way of life. That's free market enterprise. That's capitalism in its best form, not cronyism where we're gaming the system via government, but just allowing for free trade. I think that's a win all around, not just for us, but for the world economy and ultimately, eventually, for the people of China.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, they say that the largest economy in the world will be Africa by 2050. And, China is making all of these moves aggressively, in Africa. Some would say they're ultimately trying to build back the Silk Road. What's your opinion of, China spending, buying ports, owning those ports that are critical for the African infrastructure, and, U.S. Involvement in Africa versus China's involvement in our kind of fight for that future economic benefit?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is instead of what we've been doing, engaging Africa for a long time has been just via foreign aid, which is buying medical goods or food or what have you. But really, what foreign aid does is it takes money out of the working man's pocket here in the United States and the richest nation on earth and gives that money to the richest people and the poorest nations on earth to parse out and to give out favor. I would rather us see doing direct market, market investment via things like microlending at the citizen level, where individuals are loaning out what is a small sum of money to us in the United States, but can really go far into help building entrepreneurship and expanding businesses in Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, where there is the poorest folks in the world who need the most in direct investment. That's not colonialism. That's not taking over. That's not buying it up. But that's actually investing in their ability to succeed. Because with microlending, if you're not familiar, it's where you loan out small sums of money at a zero interest rate to the developing world, and they eventually pay that back. And so you can loan out $1,000, it comes back. You loan it out again, and it's basically providing a line of credit for these business owners, entrepreneurs, other people maybe getting an education that need that leg up, and you're getting it returned interest free. And so it's not like you're making money off of it, but what you're doing is you're creating markets that will one day be taking the goods they're producing and putting it onto a container that will one day be coming to the United States. And so you're helping to foster true economic development as opposed to just parsing out, as a friend of mine says, rice and mosquito nets. Like that is great that we're providing food and aid, and there are great NGOs that do that. But the best way for us to invest in these economies to grow is to actually invest in these entrepreneurs at the one-on-one level. And I think microlending is something that we as individuals can do and mutual aid organizations can do, maybe not necessarily the government, to really foster relationships and development in that area of the world that will pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah. So what do you think about for, entrepreneurs right here at home? I've recently learned, as I got my international trade certification, that only 9% of U.S. businesses are exporting. With that being the case, how can we expect, U.S. companies to kind of foster and build those relationships when we have such, low number of exports, currently in the States?
Well, I think one of the things that is important to realize is how much of the economic share that we take up in this country. We're like 3% of the world's population. We use 25% of the energy and goods. And so it's understandable that we have like this imbalance between import and export because we have such a large population here that uses so much more than the rest of the world. One of the things we want to do is through direct market investment, as you build these marketplaces, say, in the developing world of Latin America or sub-Saharan Africa, where they're needing this investment, over time, their economies are going to build, and they're going to want to see other consumer goods, not just African-made or Latin American-made goods. They're going to see European or North American-made goods. I say that one of the best ways to share a relationship is to try to foster those relationships, try to create prosperity there so we can export our values via our goods. I use the example, it wasn't just Ronald Reagan telling Gorbachev to tear down the wall that tore it down. What tore down the Berlin Wall and ultimately the Iron Curtain was Wrangler jeans, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, rock and roll music, things that people on the other side of the Iron Curtain got glimpses of and little bits of, and then once they got a little, they wanted a lot more. And it created more market liberalism in that area of the world. I think if we could do the same in Africa and Latin America, we're going to create those relationships, and you're going to start seeing a lot more Nikes getting on container ships going to Africa as opposed to merely going to the United States. Or Coca-Cola or whatever American company it is can start exporting more goods because you're creating a larger middle class. You're actually developing the world out there. This is why they're called developing economies. They're still trying to bring about that large, broad middle class that the quote-unquote developed world has. I don't like those terms. It's better than third world, obviously. That's a horrible term to use. But for me, these populations are growing in a way that we did 150 years ago when we had the Industrial Revolution. We broadly created the middle class. So once that happens, you'll see a lot more United States goods being exported. I think the biggest thing we can do for American entrepreneurs is make it easier to start a small business, make it easier to reduce the regulation and the red tape that is involved with you starting a small business so you can actually not just produce exports, but flourish domestically too.
So I got to ask the question: what's your take on taxes, the corporate tax rate?
Well, libertarians, we believe that taxation is theft. Ultimately, that it is government taking money out of your pocket to allocate resources in a way that you don't decide on. And so we would like to reduce taxation as much as possible. For corporate tax rates, if I could wave a magic wand, right, which no president can do, but if I could, I would remove all subsidies, all deductions, all giveaways that are mostly lobbied by these large corporate interests that benefit them and not the mom and pop business, the average emerging entrepreneur. I would do away with all of those and just flatten the tax rate down, just completely lower it so you have a true competitive market. So emerging entrepreneurs can become small business owners, and they can grow their business to compete and become a medium-sized business. that can then grow and compete and become a large business, that can then grow and compete and become a multinational, right? That's what you want to see. And the most important part about this is when a big company starts screwing up and they make a lot of mistakes and they fail, you let them fail. You don't bail them out the way we have in the past. You let them fail, you let their resources become liquidated and reallocated across to other firms that are going to do a better job handling that. That's the problem we have in our country. We don't have true free markets. We don't have a true capitalist system. What we have is a capitalist system up until you get big enough to lobby the government, and then you get all that government socialism when you fail. Yes. It's creating an imbalance.
No, I love that, man. And one of the things that made me excited about having this conversation was you're not 78 or 80, and you understand and have been through some of these issues that we've experienced as millennials and Gen Zers and Gen Xers over time. So let's dive into some of the policies that are critical to Gen Xers and millennials. So what are your takes on, Social Security, student debt, some of the issues that we're living with right now?
Yeah, so let's talk about those two in particular. So Social Security. My parents live on a fixed income, and I certainly don't want to take that fixed income away from them. Like I tell all the time when I speak to millennials, raise your hand if we got rid of Social Security today, if you could take care of your parents just with no problem. No one ever raises their hand. Okay. But I also recognize that Social Security itself is kind of a Ponzi scheme. You pay into it, and you don't get nearly what you would if you just invested into a mutual fund or an IRA or just even in the S&P 500, right? So what I want to see is a Social Security system that is sunsetting for this last generation that allows them to retire on the fixed income that they've been paying into. As you get younger and younger, you're going to see reduced benefits because people have more and more time still left in the workforce to start saving for retirement. But when you get to a younger person like me at 39, if I pay into the system, there's a good chance I'm not going to get any benefit by the time I get to retirement. So how about you let me keep my employee contribution for myself to invest in an IRA, a mutual fund, or anywhere else in the marketplace, and you keep the employer contribution, which your employer pays in the system, to keep it solvent long enough for our parents and grandparents. That allows us to decouple ourselves from a system that just isn't paying out what it's worth, not keeping up with inflation, and allowing us to invest for ourselves, but also making sure that our parents, our grandparents, or whoever is close to retirement is still going to be able to have some sort of security into their retirement. But we have to wean ourselves off of this system. Student loans. I am neither like Donald Trump, who just wants to keep the status quo, nor Kamala Harris, who thinks we should just forgive all this debt and have that be paid for on the taxpayers, who are plumbers and welders and pipe fitters and servers in restaurants who never went to college, but now they're all of a sudden paying for academics and lawyers and folks like that to get their degrees. No, what I want to see is us getting people out of the student loan loop where they're paying in minimum payments and they're stuck paying years and years and years. And so over 90% of student loans are government backed. And so if I were president, I would try to pass legislation that would make all currently government held student loans interest free as of today. So you can just pay down your principal paired with no new government backed loans. So you can clear the government's balance sheet, and then trying to transition the system over to more a free market system where banks are determining what needs to be loaned out, to a student based on the worth of that degree. And colleges would also have to correspondingly change their price structures to where degrees that are worth more, of course, they can charge more, but degrees that are worth less in the long run, they'll have to charge less for. Create real market incentive to lower the cost of higher education.
Well, that sounds interesting. It's like an engineering degree might cost you $100K versus, a liberal arts degree might cost you cheaper. Are you saying that colleges should do something like that?
Yeah,
or?
Based on the value of what the expectation is. So if you're looking for, it's morally the banks. So if you go to a bank and say, I want a loan, I'm going to go to school to become an engineer. Well, they know they're very much likely to get that loan paid back. And so, it behooves college can, charge a relative rate to that. But if you're saying going into getting a degree that does not pay as much out in the long run, a bank says, hey, we might not loan you as much. And well, if a higher institution, education of higher institution learning wants to still offer that degree, they're gonna have to lower the cost of it because it's becoming unattainable. And right now we have an artificial price floor created by the government backing the student loan business. And anytime government creates an artificial price floor, any firm worth their salt is going to use everything they can to get every dime out of that. It's like if I gave you $10,000 a year to go to whatever school you wanted, every school would instantly have an extra $10,000 built into their tuition. They'd find a way to spend that $10,000. Remove that price floor and watch as prices drop.
I find that interesting. I love it. The only issue that I find is that if we remove the price floor, for college, does it create a barrier for people to attend college if we don't have those loans available? And I understand that we have to do something. It's gotten out of control. but does it create a barrier for folks that family might not be able to, pay them or co-sign for them to get that bank loan?
And I think one of the ways you can address shortfalls, just because I'm a libertarian, so just because I don't want government to do something doesn't mean I don't think it needs to be done. I think the best way to help those students and those who are like maybe on a lower rung of the economic ladder, so to speak, is to provide mutual and direct aid organizations, nonprofits that can then help fund students or help provide loan assistance or help provide backing for loans, like collateralization. Because, if you're a billionaire, you might be able to say, hey, I'm willing to put up $50 million worth of collateral to help students. I'm not loaning them money, but if the loan fails, well, the collateral will cover that. I think you can find plenty of people who would be willing to set up nonprofits and mutual aid organizations that can address those shortfalls. The same way would, if we remove some of the welfare system that we have, it won't disappear people wanting to help those who are less fortunate. We're just going to start organizing ourselves independently of government to do that, which I would argue is actually a more efficient way to allocate those resources than central planning.
Well, you're sitting in the nonprofit capital of America right now. I think it's said that Louisville has more nonprofits per capita than any other place in the world. I mean, in the U.S. So I would say that we see some of those benefits here in Louisville of having those nonprofits, but I think that there's a ebb and a flow of who supports those nonprofits, what missions do they want to push and support. So does it create almost a lobbying therefore of those nonprofit dollars? I mean, it's kind of happening now.
Yeah, there's going to certainly be people arguing what's more important, what is what is our priority list. Yeah, that's always going to be happening in a market system, and there will always be those indicators and those things that kind of push money one way or the other, for sure. Now, here's one thing I will be honest with people about: any major change to our economy, there will be some sort of pain there. There's always pain and adjustment. There's never anything that's just perfectly clean and just it's cuts like a razor. That never functions within government. There's always going to be pain points. But here's the truth: if we had gotten ourselves to a more reduced state, no longer running up debts and deficits, a smaller, more limited government that's transparent 20 years ago, there would have been less pain if we had done it 20 years ago. If we wait and do it 20 years from now, there will be more pain than there is today. And as a millennial, somebody who's going to be alive for the next 40 years, hopefully, God willing, 40, 50, 60 years, however long healthcare keeps me going, right? I have a vested interest in making sure that we remove the pain point as quickly as possible. And maybe it's because I'm a millennial and we're already used to being dumped on. Right? We already feel like the world's already on our shoulders, and we're like, hey, what's one more weight? As long as that weight doesn't get applied to the next generation, to Gen Z or to Gen Alpha, my nephews and my nieces, right? I want them to have a more safe, secure world with a more limited and transparent government. And recognizing that there's going to be pain at some point, I think it's time for me to take the pain. And as opposed to an 80-year-old who's arguing that millennials need to take the pain, I'm a millennial who's saying millennials need to take the pain now so we can fix this thing before we're too old to be able to fix it. And then and the pain is being felt by those who are coming up in the world, Gen Zers and Gen Alpha. And I think we as a generation, maybe it's our role, maybe it's our responsibility to basically do what the greatest generation did before us, to really realign ourselves in a more prosperous path. So that way then people who come after us can do a lot better.
Yeah, I love that, man. And you talked about the pain, but what happens when us millennials can't afford the health care to afford that pain shot that we need? And so what's your take on health care? What do we do about the uninsured?
Well, I think we need to reduce the cost of health care. I don't think a single payer healthcare system is going to work in the long run. It will create shortages. Anytime you see a command economy commodify something, it creates shortages. So healthcare would be no different. What I want to see is what are things we can do to reduce the cost of healthcare? Namely, let's be able to buy healthcare across state lines, so that way there's more competition from insurance companies. Let's remove the cap on health savings accounts, which is currently, I think, under $4,000, which the average person spends $13,500 a year on healthcare. So let's remove that cap altogether, so all your healthcare spending is done without taxation, free of that, which is a great savings to individuals, and can be very high depending on the state you live in. Let's remove patent evergreening on drugs, so that way we can get more generics online more quickly. Insulin is a great example. We would have generic insulin if the producers of insulin didn't constantly remake the patent because they changed the delivery system ever so slightly just so they can get an extension on that patent. If you had generic insulin, it'd be on Mark Cuban's website right now for the cost of it plus 15%, just like all the other generic drugs he has on his website. And this would be a direct incentive to have pharmaceutical companies lower their prices. The other way you create that pressure for them to lower prices is you allow us to buy drugs across international boundaries. Because I don't know if you notice, drugs in Mexico are a lot cheaper than they are in the United States. Drugs in Canada, drugs in Europe, a lot cheaper than they are in the United States. And it's because we have basically gamed the market to where pharmaceutical companies can jack up the price for us here in the United States. So allow real market competition, and you'll see a lowering in drug costs. So there's a lot of things we can do without having government take over the healthcare system to lower the cost. Another alternative that can also pressure the insurance companies is direct primary care as a healthcare model, where you pay into a doctor's office directly, and you get unlimited visits to the doctor's office. But say you need an X-ray, well, you pay for that out of pocket, and it's a system that studies have shown can save millions of Americans thousands and thousands of dollars a year if there were more direct primary care practices in their area. So as that grows and becomes a direct competitor insurance, you're going to see lowering prices as well. And if I could do one thing with the insurance company, it'd be I hate the fact that insurance is so tied to our jobs, because it traps people in a job that they maybe don't want to be in, or makes them prevent them from maybe starting a new job. I would wish insurance pools, instead of being pooled by employer, were pooled by region. And so that way it's just a pool of 100,000 or 500,000 people across the region, as opposed to everybody who has this particular policy with this company. You could spread the risk out a lot more and lower costs.
Yeah, and I think that would also benefit, entrepreneurs and small businesses, because they could then get in on the regional plan, versus now they have nothing that they can do. They have to pay the full cost for their employees. So I think that I love that idea of the regional plan.
And if you're individually buying your healthcare plan as opposed to having your job do it, you then have an incentive to ask your job to pay you more money. Let you buy your healthcare. Don't let your job decide what your healthcare is for you. Just tell them to give you the money, and you'll go decide for your healthcare. That's something we could do to really change the dynamic that would not have people shackled to a desk or a cubicle that they don't want to be shackled to. And you're right, a small business owner could actually better compete in the marketplace if we had regional pools as opposed to insurance pools based on workplaces or those kinds of things. So there's a lot we could do to lower the cost of healthcare that's just not being done. Why? Because it's better to fight over it. It's better for the Democrats and Republicans to raise money on it and lobby against it and act like the other people are the only ones not doing their job when no one's doing their job. Yes. And so this is why we need third voices, because we could get a lot of that stuff done if we just had an adult in the room.
Yeah, man, I think you're right. So I got to ask this question from my boomers and beyond. When I first looked up your platform, the first thing that I see, when I search the photo, is you with the flag. I guess it's American flag, and it's got the rainbow colors, and it has the
"Don't tread on me." Yeah.
Yeah. What does that flag mean? What does that represent? And just for our viewers, when they look you up and they see you with the flag, what does that represent?
So the Gadsden flag it's traditionally a flag that's been around since the time of the American Revolution, and it's pretty apparent when it says "Don't tread on me." It's basically saying to not have government trod upon the rights of peaceful people. Now I have the rainbow version because I'm LGBTQ myself. It's something that I wave that one around at the pride parades, because I think it's important for every individual across the spectrum, gay, straight, trans, cis, whatever, to know that they have inherent human rights that should not be tread upon by any government anywhere for any reason, so long as you're living peacefully. It's kind of important. I'm the first millennial candidate for president across the country. I'm also the first openly gay candidate to be running for president across the country on so many ballots. And so I would hope that folks both old and young could see that it's nice to see that more people are able to feel like they have a voice in our politics. And just because I'm gay doesn't mean that I don't care about the straight people in my life, in my community, in my country. I think we all have the freedom to be who we are, express ourselves as we see fit, love who we want to love, so long as it's in a world of consent and mutual agreement. Like, I think that is a good thing for our world. And so to those who might see the rainbow flag, my message is you don't have to be afraid of that. In fact, that flag doesn't just represent only gay people. It represents the broad spectrum of humanity, every color of the rainbow. Ultimately, so long as you're willing to live, and being accepting of other people's lives, you're totally welcome there. I have plenty of straight allies who wave that flag too.
Yeah. And what about the marijuana leaves that you see on there? What does that say about?
Oh, that one. So that was the. So that was the one at the Portland, Maine one. That was the American flag one that had the cannabis leaves. So we in the Libertarian Party, we have always, from our inception, supported an end to the drug war. We think if you're an adult, you should be able to consume what you want to consume. And we recognize that, again, just like I say, it's bad to fight a war on an idea, like the war on terror, right? The war on drugs. Like if we're fighting a war on drugs, let's be real. Drugs have won. They're cheaper and more potent than they've ever been. They're more available than they've ever been. And we spent hundreds of billions of dollars throwing many people in jail, millions of people in jail for simple drug possession, simple drug sales. We need to radically change the way we think about this. And the best way to look at this is like the country of Portugal. They decriminalized all drugs. They had the highest heroin use in Europe. They decriminalized all drugs. They allowed people to, if they had a drug, to go test it at a pharmacy so they can make sure they weren't about to OD on fentanyl or anything else. And guess what? The rate of IV drug use dropped dramatically. It's now the lowest in Western Europe. The HIV and hepatitis rates, they leveled off because there weren't new HIV and hepatitis cases in that country. It allowed for more safe use. There's less overdoses there. And so these are all conditions that if we change our mind from thinking of drugs as a bad criminal thing that we have to stamp out using police and more address addiction itself, which is not just the drug. You can use whatever drug you want. But if you're suffering from addiction, we need to recognize that as a medical issue that needs intervention on the medical side of things, not on the criminal justice side of things. And libertarians have always advocated for that. And now we live in a country that over half of this country lives in a state where cannabis is legal for recreational use. We will not stop until that's 100% of the country, as well as every other drug, basically being decriminalized so people aren't being thrown into jail cells simply for being an addict.
Yeah, I agree, man. We have to do something different. Kentucky, Louisville as a whole has a high population of overdoses and deaths from
fentanyl. Well, and we have to think about why those overdoses are occurring. It's not just because people are like, hey, I want to take fentanyl today. It's because they think they're taking a Xanax or they think they're taking some heroin, and there's actually fentanyl in there because they have frauded you to press that fentanyl into a Xanax pill. Now, first off, that's fraud. It's wrong, even though I believe you should legally do what you want. If someone's selling you something that they say is this and it's actually that, that's fraud. That's wrong on their part, and it leads to overdoses. But imagine a world where a drug user in Louisville could take their heroin to a pharmacy and have it be tested and someone say, hey, there's fentanyl in this. Or if a mutual aid organization was passing out fentanyl testing strips to addicts so they could know that there's something wrong in their drug and not to take it anymore. That would save lives. I know organizations that have saved thousands of lives using fentanyl testing and Narcan, as opposed to throwing people in jail.
Man, it's clear. People aren't going to stop doing drugs. They're going to find a way to get them there. And it would be best if it was on an open market where you could make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, it also leads to disparate outcomes if you look at which populations get thrown in jail for drug use and which don't. It's black and brown faces that are more likely to receive harsher sentences, receive felony convictions. And once you're a felon, you don't have the right to vote. So then you're no longer involved in the political process. Your voice gets discounted. People don't listen to you because, of course, a politician can't earn anything off of you, earn that vote. And so it creates a vicious cycle that hurts people who are either racial minorities or those in the lowest economic ladder rungs. And it's wrong to do that. And I think if we really want to see a better, more free world, we have to change our priorities.
Awesome. Well, Chase, I know we're coming up on an hour. Is there anything that I left out that you want to, say, or any topics that you want to discuss that we didn't cover yet?
Well, broadly speaking, I just want to encourage voters to just really think about the fact that they have more than two options in their ballot. I encourage them to go to my website, votechaseoliver.com, follow me on social media at Chase for Liberty, but look at my platform and look at the platform of my opponents. And before you go into the voting booth, try to take an unbiased, blind taste test, so to speak, of our platforms. And I bet you come along agreeing with the Libertarian Party the most. And if that's the truth, you shouldn't be afraid to vote Libertarian this November.
All right. Well, thanks, Chase. Appreciate you coming on the Network and Chill podcast, man.
Thank you very much.